Now, let me give you the latest on the bushfires in Australia. There's particular focus on the states of Victoria and New South Wales, where there are fears that a number of these fires could merge into what's being called a mega blaze. Now, this is a live visualization of active fires. Let me get rid of that privacy notice. This is a BuzzFeed article, actually. Active fires from NASA. As you can see, New South Wales is bearing the brunt of this. There was brief respite over the weekend with some light sooty rain, and it was well received in Sydney. So some cheers for the rain, but I'm afraid it's not going to last long. The hot, dry weather is due to return, though, and Prime Minister Scott Morrison is warning the fire emergency could last for months. Here are some of the latest pictures. First of all, these are taken in Victoria. Astonishing, from inside a military aircraft attempting to land in a haze of bushfire smoke. The military is now involved in a range of evacuation efforts. We also have these aerial pictures which show the devastation of one community in Batlow in New South Wales, and you get an idea of the extent of the damage. The fires are also having devastating environmental consequences. Koalas usually get their water intake from eucalyptus leaves. As you can see at the moment, they're having to get a lot of help from us. These pictures from South Australia's Kangaroo Island. It's renowned for its wildlife. It's home to several threatened species. There are now fears some species could be wiped out. We know in New South Wales alone, it's believed that hundreds of millions of animals have been killed. Well, next let's focus on the coastal town of Eden in the far southeast of New South Wales. Many residents have been evacuated. Our correspondent Shaima Khalil is there.
Eden Wharf had become a makeshift evacuation centre when the weekend fires came very close to this town. People came here, they sheltered in boats, in cars, some in the open air just to be close to the water. We have a bit of a lull in the weather now. The temperatures and the winds have dropped. We have rain, which many people have been telling me they were praying for, but we know this is not going to last. Authorities are saying they're expecting worse conditions later in the week, and that's really been the story of these fires. There are more to come, and people are living in limbo.
And this is what residents in Eden have told us.
Basically the uncertainty as to what happens when the fire does come through, because how fast is it going to come, how's the wind going to... If the wind really picks up and comes over that hill, it's going to come in like, you know, like a fireball.
It's just a waiting game. But we'll get there, just a minute.
What are you waiting for?
For it to stop.
Now, we should also mention the firefighters. Some are paid professionals, many are volunteers, and some of them have lost their lives since these fires began. This is a picture that was widely shared from last week, where a one-year-old boy received a bravery medal on behalf of his father, who had died a few days before. And since September, 25 people, firefighters and others, have died. Over 1,200 homes have been destroyed, and millions of hectares have been burnt out. Prime Minister Scott Morrison has announced a further $1.4 billion to help with the fire recovery.
We make this commitment to all Australians that we will be there for you during this immediate response, and we will be there for the rebuilding and the recovery. And today in Cabinet we have made a number of decisions to support that recovery effort, to do whatever it takes, to do whatever it costs, to meet those needs, to build our resilience for the future, and to enable Australians, wherever they are, all across the country, to be able to go forward in confidence for their futures.
Well, the Prime Minister's been facing relentless criticism. Remember, he went on holiday to Hawaii during a week in December when the temperatures spiked and the fires intensified. There's also been frustration that help for rural communities has been too slow and too little. Remember this from last week?
No Liberal votes. You're out, son. You are out.
And we've seen his sincerity being questioned too. My colleague Nick Bryant says an Australian Prime Minister slammed for being a slick PR man out of his depth in the midst of a national crisis responds to criticisms by producing a slick PR ad. And that's a reference to Scott Morrison's previous career in marketing, but also to this video which the government has put out in the last few days. This is some of it. That's the government pushing back at the idea that it's not responding adequately to this crisis. The most serious criticism, though, aimed at Scott Morrison, is that he's not doing enough on climate change. The context here is that Australia's been getting hotter over the last century, especially in the last 25 years. That increase in temperature has been caused by climate change, which in turn is caused by humans. And the higher temperatures mean that the chances of bigger, faster, more intense bushfires are higher than they used to be. Now, Scott Morrison acknowledges reducing emissions would reduce bushfire risk, and he says Australia is meeting its climate commitments, but that's disputed by the UN. It's also disputed by one of the architects of the Paris Climate Accord. She accuses Australia of cheating the system, and she created the system, so she's familiar with it. Scott Morrison also talks about the need for balance, and what that really means is helping to reduce Australia's emissions while supporting Australia's vast fossil fuel industry, which creates lots of emissions. It's a tough balance, especially as coal experts were worth $42 billion in the last financial year for Australia and were responsible for around 50,000 jobs. So these are difficult political choices, no doubt. But Scott Morrison is clear his government takes climate change seriously. But here are some examples which don't necessarily quite fit with that. This is his deputy talking about people who were trying to connect the fires and climate change.
Well, they don't need the ravings of some pure, enlightened and woke capital city greenies at this time when they're trying to save their homes.
Or there's the Prime Minister's backbench MP Craig Kelly. He posted on Facebook a few weeks ago, climate alarmists have been out peddling the claim that rising temperatures due to climate change are putting the Boxing Day test in doubt. That's a cricket game. He goes on to say, it's a total deception, a complete pack of lies. And like everything to do with climate change, it's not only a lie, but the truth is the exact opposite. This is the same MP who in 2016 linked renewable energy to child drownings. And he, I should reiterate, represents the party in power. Or there's the senior government MP reacting to news last year that a news website would not quote climate change deniers. He came out and, well, he was far from happy, saying Adolf Hitler, Joseph Stalin and Mao Zedong couldn't have put it better themselves. They'd be so proud. To so superciliously and arrogantly deny a voice to an alternative point of view is reminiscent of totalitarian regimes. Of course, the difference being here that those three were in power and were responsible for the deaths of millions. The news website was just choosing not to quote people saying things that aren't true. But for some in the Liberal Party, the question remains, is climate change real? Not so much, what do we do about it? It's also worth noting that the previous Prime Minister, Malcolm Turnbull, you can see this reported in the New York Times, was toppled by the Liberal Party itself over his plans to rein in greenhouse gas emissions. As Mr Morrison says, it's a balance.